Hey guys, so of course the ban list is in effect today, pretty exciting. Now of course we don't actually have any regional level events so far because it is the first day, so I'm just going to do the meta tier list the more conventional way, and definitely let me know in the comments how you would change the tier list, what are some of the best decks, what are some of the sleeper decks, etc. Obviously I'm not going to be perfect at this, but I think in terms of the best decks, I think pretty much everyone is putting like Yubel and Snake Eye up here. I mean, sure, I think Yubel is like definitely like the more safe pick maybe, but I think you just can't really sleep on Snake Eye anymore. Obviously, they got some consistency hits, but I think what we've seen, especially with like, let's say like the April ban list, I get it, they didn't hit them directly, but they did still hit some of the, like the synchro end pieces, and they still like very, very overwhelmingly came out on top. So, you know what, I'll just put these two at the top here. I think maybe at the beginning, maybe Yubel kind of takes the lead, but I think over time, maybe Snake Eye will just kind of catch up again. So that's there. And then this runic picture is supposed to represent stun. They did lose skill drain, but the runic engine in itself did not get hit at all, and stun was actually doing quite well post infinite forbidden, just like whatever, pretty much every competitive level. So I'm still gonna put it here. Yeah, sure, skill drain to 1 hurts, but there's so many floodgates out there. I mean, it's just like they'll just find something else. So I'm pretty confident in that. Memento I think is also a very good one as well. So I'm gonna put it here. I did recently do like a Memento survey video where basically I surveyed like the players that are playing this deck in terms of like outlining key strengths and key weaknesses. I think that just a lot of like really fun combos available with this deck. One of the downsides though is they don't really have like a built-in Omni negate, so like they can kind of suffer from, let's say, backward removal especially. And also they did note how shifter is very crippling for this deck. There's just no way to really actually play around it really, and shifter of course did not get hit, so that is definitely something on the downside. I'm just gonna put these two here. Maybe you could like flip these two. I mean, I just don't want to sleep on runic stun anymore because I think they're just gonna keep rolling around. And Tenpai, they did lose Sengen summoning of course, but I think you can still put them as kind of these three still as being like the best decks of the format, which it's not like the best to see after a ban list. At least Tenpai is a little newer though, but I mean, with Snake Eye being essentially dominant since February at least, I think a lot of us were hoping for a change, but I mean, it is what it is, I guess. Drytron, I mean, they did get support in Infinite Forbidden, which I guess is kind of slept on because of all the new cards that came out, like the Fiendsmith stuff most notably, and of course, like something like Pearlia, like generic cards. But you know what, I'm going to put Drytron here. They actually did get I think at least one regional top or two sort of at the tail end of that format, or rather before this ban list. So I mean, I still want to at least respect it. Branded Despia, this is obviously something I've been rolling with. They did get hit 2-1 in terms of Branded Fusion. Really weird considering they should have just banned Sanctifier. I actually recently provided a deck profile with this post ban list, so you can check that out as well. I think the deck is still fine for sure. There's nothing absolutely like critical about it. It definitely hurts, don't get me wrong, especially like turn 3 play, but the gimmick clock is still definitely there. There's a lot of different ways I think to play Branded, and I think I'm pretty excited. Like Grass is back. Some people might try like 60 card lists as well. They're not gonna gain advantage as much as something like, let's say, like Tearlands or even like Light Sworn, for example. But still, I think there are a lot of different ways to play this, and I think I'm pretty excited for what other people are going to come up with. Vanquish Soul, I guess the first one to let's just put in the rogue section. Haven't really heard too much about it lately, but you know what? It's a deck that can play Shifter, and it's still legal, so can't really sleep on that. And Salad, let's put it higher. I think this deck is still good. You still have like all the generic fire support that you can make use of, and it was pretty consistent in terms of getting tops as well. Orcus, I would probably put in like the other section. Definitely fell off after the initial hype when Orcus Harpor came back, but really I think for the most part, I mean, runic stuff is still there at least, and runic and Orcus went pretty well. At least that's kind of how the competitive builds were playing, so it's still, I think, enough worth highlighting. And same thing can be said for Dark World. I might even put it at Rogue because they actually, I believe, had a little bit more regional tops leading into this ban list. You know what, I'll just put it there for now. Probably at the bottom though, if anything, like somewhere like top here. Worth debating. And then Voiceless Voice, this definitely fell off lately, especially after Infinite Forbidden came out. Pot of Prosperity did get limited. That is something they play, but you know what, the deck is still pretty consistent. I think maybe it's not like super oppressive though. It's a pretty fair deck, I want to say. So I think, you know what, we'd still put it here. Obviously there's people playing Bestials more again just because of like Fiendsmith stuff, and that will really eat up Voiceless Voice. Marin says, unfortunately, I'm gonna have to put another. I know usually it's like definitely in the rogue category, it would like sneak in like a YCS level top here and there. But lately, especially post Infinite Forbidden, I don't think there were actually any regional tops, at least that were publicly available. So I'm gonna have to put it here for now. Rika, you know what? You can't sleep on them with like other. They didn't get any direct hits at least, and with other decks getting hit. You know, just better for Rika, right? Especially when their deck is really, they don't really have like generic extra deck monsters that they play. Maybe sometimes I've seen them play SP, but for the most part they don't really. And you know, obviously SP is still legal, and so yeah, I think that they're a pretty solid choice, and you can't sleep on them. Tier limits, you know what, let's put in the Rogue. Beatrice ban definitely is gonna hurt, no doubt, but they do have Brass, which I'm sure people will love to try it out, especially at the beginning, post ban list, and in terms of release, not just like power level, but of course tier list, also based on like representation, right? And so, you know, with those kind of like initial hype, I know it's a one-off, but still, I'm sure they will want to try it out at least at the beginning. Pearly, also, let's just put some respect there, but let's just put it there for now. I don't think not much has changed. There were some Pearly Fiendsmith lists as well in terms of like topping ones, but I think it's still fair to say it's more of a rogue option at this point. And of course, you can't go rogue without saying hero. Really one of the more reliable ones there and especially with like Dark Glob, Macrocosmos, banishing effect, very good right now, hence the shifter, and a lot of calls for it getting banned. But I think hero also, they're getting more support again. You know, they kind of get one every 3 minutes, but now they actually will get like an Omni Negate eventually through, I think it was a form of a trap. So that was like the one thing that they were missing, because they have pretty much everything else. So yeah. Ritual Beast, you know what, I really want to put the respect on this one as well, because if you kind of base it on the amount of tops, like whatever level, even up to regionals, as well as of course WCQ, YCS, Ritual Beast was actually doing quite well. And on one hand, they did lose Prosperity. Again, this is another one of those decks that I did a survey video on in terms of the pilots. So they did mention the consistency being an issue and Prosperity, although their extra deck is pretty tight, so they could always only realistically banish 3 if they were to run it, but I'm sure that does hurt them. But again, as I mentioned, Shifter is still around. This is deck that can't play it. You still have like, you know, Colossus. I'm not sure if Protoss, they still go with that. There's like kind of just different floodgates that they can play. They can also play Baguska, that's still legal. So they have a lot of floodgate, very strong cards that they can play, and so I think it's up there. And speaking of Shifter, can't say that without Flunder. So they also did lose Prosperity, which is a big one for them. They are known to have some form of breaking issues, right? Just because of like all the big birds, for example. But I'm sure, like, I mean, for example, when Flunder first came out, people were playing like with like Extravagance as well, and you still have like the Pot of Duality. So I'm sure there's like different options. While maybe not as ideal as Prosperity, it's still good enough, and I'm sure they're gonna be fine. Mananium, let's just put in Rogue. I don't want to sleep on them too much. They have gotten lots of indirect hits over the course of the past half year, right? Like, for example, like the Barone ban, now Appaloosa is one of the cards they played, and even Calamity being banned. I know some of the topping Mananium lists were playing like Centurion packages, as with a lot of different synchro strategies in terms of turbing out Calamity, and now that's gone. But so I think it's still going to be in the Rogue section. I mean, Droll isn't maybe as popular as it was when Infinite Forbidden format first started, but still, I think. And Mimighoul, this is a deck I think it's really cool. It does have some notable tops. Maybe I'll just put it here. Maybe Vanquish Soul can be around here as well, just because it's not as like popular right now. Mimighoul, I think I've been seeing this quite a lot online. Shifter, they do play this, and of course now it's still legal. Otherwise though, I'm not really sure. I think it's a really fun deck, but I don't think it's quite there yet. But I think it is still at least getting some tops here and there, and I do hope that it maybe gets some additional support down the line. Raid Raptor, I'll just put it in other for now. I think it's gotten like one top in like the last like few months. It's definitely fallen off quite hard. You know, in terms of like its towers, definitely for a lot of decks, it can be pretty hard to out, but it hasn't been seeing much competitive either success or representation lately, unfortunately. And same thing, maybe you could say that for Dynamorphia as well. I'll just put it here. I mean, you know what, they play like, I think like a lot of counter traps from what I recall at the last topping list that I saw. I think it's pretty cool. Definitely a weird one to play against. Through like regional level and up, I'm not sure how it really works with time, because this is possibly like the worst deck you could choose to play in time. But you know what, Lacrima's Burn is also gone, so I guess that's kind of nice. But you know what, I think it's a pretty interesting deck nonetheless. Sprite, I'm also going to put it somewhere in Rogue. They didn't, I guess you could actually argue Sprite is also one of the, you know, quote unquote winners, just because they didn't get any form of direct hits. Obviously they're not really worth hitting, really. Prosperity is something that used to be the case where they always played it guaranteed, but I was actually noticing kind of like the later like the more recent topping sprite lists, like a lot of them weren't even playing Prosperity anyway, so like that being put to 1, like sure, whatever. I mean, they can still play it, but I think it's fairly consistent nonetheless. They do have a lot of space for non-engine. The ice barrier stuff allows making Toad a lot easier as well, and then just kind of recycling with like double cross. They can also play Shifter 2 with Gamma Burst. They can actually OTK people, so I think it's actually quite solid. And you know what, once like the Megaton rolls out and you get access to something like, let's say like SP presumably, you know, I think the deck is actually going to be fairly cheap to build. You also have Kashira. We were talking about Shifter all day. I'll put that over Flunder probably. Prosperity to 1, again, this is another one that would hurt them technically, but you know what, Kashira is like pretty consistent nonetheless, and I think it's solid. It's not like you have like a Rise Heart anymore where you can just kind of like add something up after like banishing, so whatever. It's like, it's still solid, I think. Whitewoods, I would put that at like tier 2. I think the Runic Whitewoods version, at least from my experience playing against it, that seemed to be like the more, it was just like harder to get through, at least from my view. I know some people, a lot of people maybe like to play it sort of like quote unquote pure with like toy stuff, and I'm sure that's fine too. And of course, Calamity is kind of banned though, and that is something that I think they had an option to do that as well, but that part's gone. But you know what, I do think it's a pretty interesting strategy. They also did lose Skill Drain to 1 now, I suppose, because this is something that they can play under, and then they can just sort of add it back as well after like just getting rid of it with their own White Force stuff. So I thought that was kind of, you know, quote unquote cool. Of course, Skill Drain is not cool, but still interesting interaction nonetheless. Dragon Link, let's just put it somewhere rogue. It definitely has fallen off, but as I always say, you can never sleep on the Dragon Link strategy, and just because Konami just tends to love dragons, and Bestials they can play a lot on more than really any deck out there probably, and that can go pretty strong right now with like for example any of the Fiendsmith stuff. And then we were sort of talking about Calamity. I mean, maybe we'll put it actually somewhere around here, I want to say. I think Centurion, even though they did lose Calamity, honestly, I find the deck is still quite solid without it. There's a lot of different strong synchro options out there. Oh, you should also keep an eye out for Steven Santoli's channel, by the way. He actually topped the Toronto regional, like post-banless Centurion. So I think that's really cool. Definitely go check him out and follow him if you haven't already, because he's obviously an incredibly strong player. And I think it's always nice to have YouTube channels out there run by really good players. So Rescue is another one I've always had a lot of high hopes on. I think, especially with like the Fiendsmith stuff, you know, it was just really good. It's honestly, it's been really good even after it fell off the tier 1 status. It just, there were just better decks out there to try. But you know, I think we quickly forget this was a tier 1 deck for a few months as well, like Aghaw format and beyond that, before leading up to Phantom Nightmare. But still really good. Monster interruptions, background interruptions, like what can you ask for? Chimera, I also want to put it somewhere here in tier 2, especially like the Fiendsmith version. It's still viable from my understanding. And the Diabells, honestly, that card is pretty insane. For one, actually, speaking of right next to a White Forest, I find like Runic version, for example, that just eats it up, right? Because you have to set your spells and traps first, and when all of your stuff is like quick play, that really kills the deck. And then also, even something like Evenly Match, which Chimera traditionally really hard loss to, now you can't even do that because you have to set the evenly first, and Super Poly, something like that. Not that it was ever really that good against Chimera, surprisingly enough. You would think it'd be good, but it wasn't. So I think this deck is actually really solid. Also very consistent as well. And you know what? Maybe you could argue it's just around the same level as Branded Despia, I'm sure. I think that's to be seen. Infernoid, I mean, let's put it at Rogue. It did get 1 top, I believe, in the last few months. Usually with like Snake Eye stuff though. But you know what? If you're playing like with pure Infernoid, with like the new support that recently came out, and I believe it was the Battles of Legends set. And now you have Grass is Green 2-1, which is going to be really fun for this deck. Fun for Infernoid players, to be clear. Not fun for someone like me playing against it. But I do think that, you know, it's been a while since Infernoid, like pure Infernoid, was sort of a competitive option. Even like 2019, it was still like at the Rogue status. But now maybe you see it popping up again here and there. Labyrinth is another one I think we have to put somewhere in tier 2. I don't want to be too specific at this point. Let's just put it here. But because, for example, D-Barrier is still around. You also, you know, let's say Appaloosa is gone, which is also kind of nice. So I think it's actually quite solid. And, you know, you can't sleep on it. I definitely saw a drop-off recently, of course, but I'm sure it's still around and it's going to be pretty strong. Melodious, that's another one. I guess maybe you'd probably put it at Rogue level somewhere here, around here, let's say. So Obviously, Melodious as an engine, that hasn't even seen much play nowadays anyways, but that was something like where it could lead to an easy Appaloosa, and now Appaloosa's gone. But pure Melodious, I found, I actually did a survey video on this one as well a while back, but I mean, they had a lot of archetype cards in terms of their end board anyways. Like they have like quick effect, bounces, like non-targeting, that's non-targeting, and then also you have like a triple DD Crow as well. So honestly, I think it's pretty solid. Definitely did not see much play nowadays in the last couple months, but I think it's still a solid option. Gimmick Puppet, I think, so if they have the field well, they can still FTK from my understanding. I'm just going to put it somewhere in Rogue, only because, not in terms of purely power level, but it's more so that, you know what, if the consistency of the FTK is hit, would people really bother playing it as much? Maybe not. So I would say from a representation standpoint, probably kind of put it down a notch. And then Lightsworn, this is another one, as we were talking about Grass is Green, I think somewhere around here. I think it's going to be pretty exciting as well. Beatrice ban, presumably. I don't know. I'm guessing they would play that if they can make it, but I'm sure that would hurt. But you know what? Stay tuned. I'm going to try to do a Lightsworn deck profile with Hanko, who actually did pretty well in the most recent Toronto regional. That was previous ban list, but he's going to try to see how he would change it for post ban list as well. So definitely stay tuned for that. But anyways, this is sort of like a glimpse of, a snapshot of like what the meta might look like. Definitely, again, let me know in the comments how you would change this. Obviously, I'm not going to be perfect. No one is going to be. It's going to be partially a guessing game as well, but really excited to see what you think about this upcoming format. Unfortunately, I'm not sure if much has changed, at least in like the top decks post ban list, but yeah, I'm still excited for at least some form of change. But anyways, huge thanks to all of you for watching. Big thanks to my patrons and sponsors as well for the continued support, and well, take care, guys.